Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
My name is Charles Hensley, and I'm a resident of Jamestown, and I'm also a member of the High Point NAACP branch. One of your agenda items will address a resolution that has been put forth to establish a commission to study the issue of reparations for the African American citizens of High Point. Speaking as an African American, it is my sincere hope that this resolution receives favorable support from the Council. It seems most fitting to me that your decision comes during a highly celebrated time for most African Americans in this country, that being Black History Month. And ironically, your decision will become a historic moment during this celebrated time that will forever be etched into the pages of this city's epic story. A story that I hope will reflect your courage, your understanding, your willingness to commit toward ensuring fair and just treatment for the advancement of social and economic stability for a marginalized segment of the citizens of High Point. But equally as important, your story could be recorded as a moment when the city of High Point failed to rise to the moment to uphold the high moral standard of equal justice for all its citizens. But rest assured, no matter which way you decide, you can be certain that your history will be recorded. And on that note, I will leave you with this quote from James Baldwin. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hensley. Next on the list is next person on the list is Brad Lilly.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Peters, City Manager Ford, council members. I stand before you to speak also on the resolution for the One High Point Commission. I first want to tell you that my great-great-grandfather was born in 1823 into slavery. He was 40-some years old when he was freed. Him and his children and those who were born after slavery had ended. His son, my great-grandfather, Samuel Norfleet, and his brothers and siblings had acquired through that process since the end of slavery to own 50 acres of land. My great-grandfather, Samuel Norfleet, was killed holding on to that land. If you search the records in 1907, you'll find where nobody was arrested. No report was given, only because in that time it was a white man trying to take land from my family. So he died to hold on to that land. And I'm proud to say that those 50 acres still remain in my family. That's my story. But the story of all is for over 244 years, High Point profited off the backs of blacks. And we want to say, as Martin Luther King said, now is the time. The injustice, cruelty, brutality, inhumanity of slavery and legal segregation is brought to bear. Black people endured murder, rape, sodomy, crimes against nature, and assault against educational, financial, and economic stability. The NAACP, on behalf of the Black community of High Point, advocates for housing solutions that mitigate displacement of our families. For the elimination of food deserts by creating food co-ops, mobile food markets, bus stop, farmers markets, and employee-owned co-op markets. For the promotion and increase in more academically qualified citizens with advanced degrees in our African American community. Today, as Mr. Hensley has already said, marks a historical moment. Recorded in the annals of history will be this decision today. And it's my pleasure to stand before you and to be in these times and a part of this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hensley. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during the public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second item we have to bring up is item 2022-47, which is a resolution from One High Point Commission. And I'll give you a little bit of background and history of this. James Mays is here tonight, who is the chairman of the local NAACP chapter. And Jim and I have talked over the years and had conversations, and those conversations have led to the NAACP presenting a resolution to the Prosperity and Livability Committee, which then came before the full council. The full council agreed to discuss this further. We've been discussing this ever since. Councilmember Holmes is on that committee. There's 2 members from the city, and there are also members in the House tonight. If you served on that committee, could you please stand up very quickly so we can recognize you and thank you for your work? So these are members of the community also that worked on this resolution. Thank you all so much. So what you have before you is an amended resolution that came from that committee, and I'll turn it over to Jerron so that he can walk you through it. And what we're asking is simply for us to acknowledge that we've received it, which gives us then the authority to discuss it further.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Madam Manager. Not a lot to add. I think Councilmember Hudson summarized some of our discussions well. One thing that we would iterate is that on the work group that council directed, we met on the 12th, the 19th of October, and November 30th. The resolution was thoroughly discussed with the NAACP. There was lots of back and forth and engagement to the extent that that Councilmember Hudson was talking about. We also had the opportunity to work with legal. Thank you, Joanne, for the work that they did to make sure that everything in line with this resolution was formatted and fitted into what a city resolution should look like. So at this point, on behalf of the One High Point Commission Work Group, staff presents the completed document to the City Council as requested.
Are there any questions from the dais for anyone? I want to make sure everyone understands where we are with this.
When you say you're asking to accept the resolution so it can be discussed further, where do you, what's the discussion to be, to bring forward? What's the goal?
The part of the resolution is how to actually set up the formal commission. So there is a separate committee that will be, established with this resolution. That committee will interview citizens who would like to serve on the commission. So this committee that was formed was not the actual commission. This is simply to have discussed the resolution coming to us. So the resolution sets up a committee. That committee, through a process of application and interview, will actually pick the commission. That commission will have a 1-year term where they'll start working on some of the items in the resolution, at which time that resolution, the actual resolution, comes back to us for further consideration. What we're considering in this resolution is that the way that we proceed here, creating The commission is what we're wanting to do. I know, it does sound,
You will have to actually adopt the resolution in order for the standing committee that you referenced, the appointing committee, which would then go ahead and appoint the committee members for the commission. All of that, all the details and the process for that are set out in the resolution. So I'm wondering, is it being presented tonight for the adoption, or is it just being presented tonight for, because the
That was
adoption,
my
if the
question, yeah.
adoption of the resolution tonight will allow the process to begin.
Madam Attorney, if I may, I think, if I can clarify what Councilmember Hudson is asking, we are asking that the resolution tonight be adopted, but open it up for any discussions or questions from anyone here. I think the resolution is here tonight to be voted on to enact.
So I have a question. So when, I remember at one point, it was going to go back to you for some amendment changes because some of us had said some things. Would it not have to go back to P&L to do a recommendation to full council? Or what, because we had not even seen the changes until today. So I don't know exactly, I'm kind of confused of what we're supposed to do today.
I understand that completely. It was put on your agenda tonight, and that's why I was having the question that I'm having right now.
that's why I wanted to clarify, it is not,
I thought it was, you were interested in making a motion or making a determination as far as the adoption of the actual resolution tonight. That is completely council's decision.
Yeah, I'm confused because what's on the agenda says that we're requested to acknowledge receipt.
It does. It does not ask for it to be adopted, which is why I wanted to ask and get some clarification, because you're right, the request that's coming on the agenda memo from staff is just that you acknowledge receipt of it. We have, I will say that we worked very well together. We've made a lot of edits for clarification, making sure that there was a clear process set out within the resolution, very detailed, so that it could be go ahead and move forward. But that, again, is completely up to council.
If I may say something?
Yes.
Well, one thing that I remember saying, I think it was like in a full council, I'm not exactly sure, I'm sure Lisa can find it in the minutes. I definitely acknowledge the fact that our history is scarred deeply. But one of the things that it asks for in the resolution is a formal apology from the city. And I'm just going to tell you that we need to come to peace. And I understand that what happens is when people are said, you have to apologize, what you're telling them is that you are guilty. And people don't want to accept guilt. That was our past, and we didn't have any say in that. And I just don't see that as a way moving forward to insist or demand an apology from the city. And that's the only part. Other than that, I love the formation of a one commission. I think it's a great idea to move forward with our city, but I just think that we have to be very cautious of how we word things so that we create a bridge and not a division.
Mayor Pro Tem Peters, currently the way it's worded in the resolution is that the commission would then go out and do an investigation, evaluate determine basically some recommendations that they would come back to the city council, whether that would include a municipal apology or anything else that the commission might find through their studies. Given the fact, however, that it sounds like council did not receive, all of you, all 9, receive a copy of this until the agenda. And I'm not sure, too, the agenda memo just requests that it be accepted. I guess that decision needs to be made tonight. Mayor, I would look to you for some guidance.
that was the request of why we're bringing it to you simply as a receipt, because if we receive it, it gives us the ability to discuss it and not have to discuss it right now on the dais with a lot of questions that could very easily be answered in open forum, but will take a lot of time here. So it's not that we want to discuss the resolution because it is involved. I do want to make sure that everyone understands what is in the resolution.
Councilmember Hudson, are you
What
recommending
would
that there
prevent you
would,
from talking about
you
it?
would receive
Yeah.
it tonight? There would be conversation, I presume informally, because you'd have to have a public meeting if there was going to be a forum?
I would assume that it would come through as a manager's briefing or at some point. That's always been my
And
understanding.
then
I never
come
thought
back
we
for a
were,
vote.
I thought we were voting to acknowledge it so that we could talk about it.
And then
Because we
bring it
haven't
back,
discussed it yet, yeah,
and bring it back through
Absolutely.
managers, And then
absolutely,
bring it back to council for a vote.
right.
Got you.
Okay. I don't have a problem with the receipt of the resolution. I would agree with some of my colleagues, and I think also that acknowledging the receipt of it and would also give time for the public to weigh in on it as well. This is a very important thing that we're considering, and I think it would be wise of us to put this out, I think, for public comment as well, for a period of time. But I will defer to Councilman Hudson and Holmes have, along with some of the folks here, have done the heavy lifting on this. And, but I do think it is something that's worthy of our time to make sure that we have a chance to discuss this, since I know Brett had a problem with his iPad and didn't even get to look at it before we came in here. So I don't have a problem with acknowledging the receipt of the resolution, but I'm not ready to move forward on a resolution of support for that item yet.
Well, there's even stuff in the language, I just want to get clarification on it, and even like the member terms and how long the terms are. It says, for the life of the commission. I know those are smaller matters, but just so we have an opportunity to ask those questions and make sure we know what's in there, whether we feel we can agree to it or have some suggestions for changes or whatever. Because I just got it, and I'm not an attorney, I'm just a Marine that, sitting up here, but I'd love to be able to have an opportunity to take some notes and ask those questions, in a time where we have the time to really chop it up that way if we could. So I don't have a problem with the receipt, but again, I want us to all have an opportunity to look at it and not be bombarded with it in 10 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, is it typical protocol to allow the public to weigh in on the adoption of a resolution?
I think it depends on what you're doing. I mean, we have, for a lot of things, there's public comment. There's time set aside for public comment. This will happen if we just receive it tonight and we're gonna take care of it. We're gonna talk about it and actually make a decision on it at a later time. I mean, in effect, we've created a time where the public can comment. I'm not saying I want to hold this open for public comment until the second meeting in March. I'm not asking for that. I'm just saying that I think giving us a chance to really delve into it and, to maybe go over it at a manager's briefing, or maybe we keep it in P&L and have an opportunity for all of us to come together at a P&L meeting. It doesn't really, the format of that doesn't really matter to me. But I think, too, that by default, we don't meet again for 2 weeks. I think folks would have the opportunity to take a look at this and give some feedback on it.
I hope that there's been a lot of time and effort put into this, both by the branch and by members of council in the community. We've bandied this back and forth a lot. We've made a lot of resolutions, a lot of revisions and a lot of changes. We've allowed outside opinions into this. I do not want to continue to belabor this. The people of High Point, the branch, they deserve a decision. I hope that we can all commit here tonight to getting into this, reading it, understanding it, having your questions, and discussing it. And if it is to come back, let it be sooner than later. I don't think that anyone is under the impression that we don't want to take this vote. We need to do this, but we need to commit to to bringing this to the full council and giving these people a vote. They put a lot of work into this, and they deserve to have that vote to recognize the work that they've done.
Mayor Wagner, I got a couple thoughts.
Okay.
Oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, because I'm
Come back to you.
probably a little more curious, I think, than some of my peers on the dais, so I got to ask a few questions. So acknowledgement of receipt was the purpose of this item coming. I'm curious if there was a miscommunication of the purpose for this agenda item being up here tonight, because it sounds like there's a number of folks who came this evening with the expectation that a decision was being made. And I think I'm curious about that. I wasn't in the discussions. I'm not one of the council members who's been involved in this. I wasn't allowed in those meetings. So I guess I just got a lot of curiosity. Because it seems like from the nodding of heads in the crowd, there's a lot of people who thought this was being voted on tonight to be approved. I don't know, in my very short tenure on council, if we've had an item that says acknowledgement of receipt of a resolution. I don't know if we've had that, and I don't know if we've ever had a time where we said, let's get public comment weigh in. I hear what we're saying about looking it over. I got a couple thoughts about that. Some of these are inquiries, some of these are observations. I'm assuming this agenda came out Friday or Thursday, as all agendas do, and the attachment was in the agenda. And I think you mentioned a council member having issues with access to iPad, but that's happened, I think, to all of us at a certain point. I've certainly, on a Friday, went to go look and, oh crap, I gotta get my password updated. It just happens. And there's been plenty of items I come in on Monday and say, well, I better do my best to try to learn as much as I can on Monday because it's being voted on tonight, especially if a delegation of council has already looked at this a lot of times. And we've already discussed this on the dais. And this resolution has a lot of the same words that we as a council already looked at and reviewed. This isn't new information that we're digesting within 1 hour's time. A lot of this is information that we've been reviewing for months. And the only thing that this resolution talks about is forming the actual commission. The resolution doesn't mention that they will say these are the recommendations. The resolution says they want to do some studying and figure out what sort of recommendations could come as a result and how those recommendations might address various things. Like, what might it look like to do some kind of apology? No one said that an apology is going to come in that way. So I think I've got inquiries and I've got observations because I got a lot of curiosity here about how much time we need to look at something, given that it was put on an agenda, just like every other item was put on an agenda for our review over the whole weekend, given that we've looked at the item really for months now and kind of talked about it, that I don't know a precedent for acknowledgement of receipt of resolutions, and I do not know a precedent for public comment on resolutions. And really all they're asking to do is to form a commission that's quite frankly using some of the same tenets of every other commission and committee and working group that we have here in the city. And so that's all my curiosity. And if folks want to address each one of those points, I think that's fantastic. But I think after you get done addressing those, I'm gonna make a motion actually that we suspend rules to add this to the agenda for consideration of approval. And then we can vote tonight if folks want to approve it or not. But I'm gonna be honest, I think I got to appeal here to some reasoning, because I just can't agree that folks are telling me this evening that you feel like you haven't had enough time to digest what it's like to form a commission. All they're talking about is how they're going to pick members and how it's going to exist. To the question of how long it lasts, it says it on the document. They'll get a report to you within 12 months. And then with X amount of days after the report, the commission will dissolve. So we're not talking about something that's going to exist into perpetuity. It's all there on the paper. It's all there on the paper. And it is so familiar to stuff we've already been doing. And I have to be clear about something else. I got to be clear about it. Because when we get to these items in which we feel like folks are just kicking the can down the road, it becomes really, really hard for communities to trust that government is trying to do the right thing. It becomes really hard. Because I've seen times, friends, that we've got incentives that we looked at, policies for incentives that we looked at on a Friday. And because we wanted it in place for a fiscal year, we voted on it on Monday because we wanted to recruit businesses to our downtown. That's the precedent I've seen. I've not seen a precedent acknowledgement of receipt. I'm not seeing a precedent of public comments on resolutions. Y'all, I'm just being honest. I'm not trying to be offensive, not trying to be obtrusive, not even trying to be aggressive. If I'm passionate, that's it. I'm just being honest, though, because it feels like the can's being kicked down the road. I remember on that night in September when we talked about this. You all know I was the one who essentially offered the compromise for us to get to this point, which says, let's just figure out how we're going to form this commission. And that's really all the tenets of what this is.
And if I may, so thank you for saying all that you just said, and I agree with you. I went back down and I did notice, and I apologize, that I misread where it says, it doesn't say the city of High Point must offer a formal apology. It says how the city of High Point may offer a formal apology. So that reads a whole different way. And so is that what you all are thinking, that just kind of figuring it out? You just want the commission so you can just figure it out?
So, Councilman
Okay.
Peters, we are not here tonight to get into the work of the full commission.
Right.
We're here tonight to vote on the resolution to form the commission and how the commission will be formed. Whatever comes out of that will come out of it once the individuals who are going to serve on that are selected. This is not that. So what apologies, programs, whatever may come out of that will come from the commission itself. This is not that. What this resolution does, it gives authority for us to form a committee that will select those who will then do the work of the commission.
But you see where the misunderstanding is, because it says, we don't know, I mean, that we were
That's
going to
just
vote.
scope.
I'm okay with us voting. I'm just saying that it was, and I don't know how that happened, but it makes it look like we're just supposed to.
Well, that wording is simply to understand what we're forming a committee to
To
build
do.
a commission
Right.
to do. It wasn't saying that this is what is going to come out of the commission. That's not what we're stating. What we're saying is this is just the scope of what the full commission will look at and address once it's formed.
Okay.
I can probably speak, and maybe the city attorney can back me up on this, I don't know. But there is some precedent for the city receiving reports, acknowledging the receipt of a report. We've done that, I think, in the past with different committees. I don't think this council has done it in the 2 years roughly we've been up here. But I do recall that occurring at some point, maybe Brent can remember that too, where we received the report back of a committee on something. And then we were able to then study what that committee brought back before we took action on whatever their recommendations were. So this is not something new we're talking about tonight. And I agree with you, this is something that we started, I guess, back in September or October, discussing. Personally, I would be in favor of us acknowledging the receipt of this report and then having some more time to discuss the fine points of it so that maybe we can get to a point where everybody can support it. But if we're going to vote on the actual resolution tonight, then that's not something I can support tonight. I can support the acknowledgement of the receipt of the report. Sure. But at this point, it's not something I can support.
Mr. Mayor, I will say, as when I see the agenda on Friday, I read it as a receipt of this, and therefore, I was in no hurry to rush down here at 8 a.m. to get in Joanne's office to ask questions, what does this mean, what does that mean? I figured because it was a receipt, that would give us a time that I could still do that, because I like to be as informed as anyone, as any of you guys are, when we're making decisions that affect anything to do with my neighbors here, so I would like, based on that premise that I thought we were voting on, I did not get my questions answered or any of that stuff. We may have been talking about September, but we got it Friday. And so I don't think with Friday hitting Saturday, Sunday, then we've been here since 3:30 discussing my things. I've had a chance to really even read through all of it. Well, I have read through all of it, but to read through it and strike out stuff. So I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I want to see this move forward, but I think we owe the citizens of High Point our chance to do our due diligence, see what we're agreeing to, what this language says. And I'm not saying kick the can down the road months or something. I'll do it next council meeting. I don't care. Just want a couple days to make sure I'm knowledgeable about what we're agreeing to or not agreeing to.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with continuing it to the next meeting.
Yeah.
If I think we can certainly get questions answered in 2 weeks. I don't think that's a big deal at all.
But now I think, though, that they don't have the answers. That's why they're forming a commission, so that they can come up with answers. So now that I understand a little bit more, I will be in support of it if anyone makes the motion.
I hear what you're saying, but there's a lot of language in here that does talk about what the parameters of that commission will study. And some of those things are still, even going back to September, we had this discussion. Some of the things that, and I'll tell you that I have read this, and I did take the time to go through it and underline some stuff. And I still have very deep reservations about the ability of the city to have the legal authority to be able to do some of the things that are called for in this resolution. Among other reasons that I have, that I'm very hesitant to support it. My worry, as I stated, whenever it was, September or October, one of my biggest worries is that we're going to go through this process for a year, and the commission is going to come back and ask us to do things that we do not have the legal authority to do. And then it's going to really look like we're kicking the can and ignoring the concerns of the community, when in reality, what we're being asked to do are things that we don't have the legal authority to do. And so I have very big reservations about the parameters that have been created in this resolution, and whether it's something that we should agree to do.
Mayor
So,
Wagner,
I think if we've got 2 weeks to discuss that, if we acknowledge receipt of it and we've got some time to discuss that, maybe we can get to the point where we feel like we've got something we can operate with that might actually work.
And that was one of the purposes that I took upon the legal department and going over when it came back to us, making sure that it was worded such that there are opportunities for things to be studied and investigated, but they're not narrowing it down to things that are illegal or impossible.
Exactly.
It was to broaden the scope so that they had options of things to come back. I will also agree that I've seen things come before council, including perhaps in the form of a resolution, that council just acknowledged receipt of, and then ask for additional information on, if that's what council wants to do tonight. And then others want to have expedited decisions. Perhaps you want to consider going ahead and putting it into a committee or a manager's briefing or something I heard another council member say earlier. Councilmember Jones and all of you, I am very glad to go over the language that is in this and answer any questions that you have. The resolution is not coming from my department, however. So as far as the actual action and what you're looking at doing tonight, I again just
So the resolution has not been reviewed by legal
The
as
resolution has
presented?
been very reviewed and very amended by legal, because the original resolution contained a lot of wording and language that would not have been possible to accomplish because it would have been outside the perimeters of the law. So it's been redrafted to, again, open up some options for the commission. And just like with the apology, there is no requirement for an apology. It simply states that they might consider bringing back an apology because it's something along the lines of they will investigate and look at different recommendations that they can bring back to city council as to what they think might be right. And one of those could be a municipal apology.
So, since,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Councilmember Johnson, so, because I was going to ask the question in regards to the legal, you guys have already looked at it, okay?
Very much so.
And the concern, I believe, that the mayor mentioned in regards to, it may be dealing with something out of the parameters that we can't do. You've looked at that. Do you see anything like that?
It depends on how much they stick to what is in there. Absolutely. There's going to be some bumpers, I believe, that need to be set up. But that will, in my opinion, come as the commission begins doing its work.
Exactly.
And kind of feeling its way along. My department will stand ready, of course, to offer advice to kind of, again, serve as a bumper. I also clearly acknowledge if you guys need, you just received this, it's a very important decision. And if you want to go over and have it described as to how things will be set up and, you know, the timing of everything. I mean, because it is a process, numerous processes that are set out within the resolution. But again, that's completely up to council and what your preference would be tonight.
Madam Attorney, I just, I want to clarify that we're not, we're speaking about two different sets of legal constraints here. I think the mayor is talking about the legal constraints of what the commission may return and we're able to do from those recommendations. I don't think there's any legal constraints on us forming the commission. This is something that we do every day. What we're doing tonight is adopting a resolution to form a commission, which there's no legal constraints on that, correct?
There are no.
So I just want to make sure that we're clear when we talk about the legalities of this and what is possible for us to do. We're not even at this point yet. The point of addressing of any legalities for anything that we may do will come from the work of the commission, which may be a year from now.
Then this council has the authority definitely to go ahead and adopt the resolution, which would put the wheels in motion for the commission to begin.
So I just don't want us to conflate what we're talking
Right,
about here.
understand.
This is two separate issues of legality.
Yeah,
And
I have no problem, I have no doubt that we have the legal authority to create the commission. That's not it. My concern is that we're going to spend a year waiting on this report to come back, and that many of the things that this commission may bring back to us may be things that we can't do. And I'm legitimately worried that if the commission brings us things that we cannot legally do, that is going to create an issue within the community, that we're ignoring the concerns of the commission, or that we are outright opposed to what the commission has brought back. And I don't think that's a position that we ought to put the city in up front. And so, I mean, I have other reasons, philosophical reasons, but I'm legitimately concerned about that when I read the parameters of what's in here. I mean, there's discussions of that this is justified based upon international law. Well, we don't do international law. You know, we do the law of the state of North Carolina and the U.S. Constitution here. We don't do international law. There's things in here that, as an attorney and as a mayor, that I have a real problem with, and I think that, you know, again, I don't have a problem with acknowledging the receipt of this report, but I do have a problem with us voting to proceed on this tonight, because I don't think this thing is ready at this point. And I don't have a problem with us coming back in 2 weeks. If we want to set 2 weeks as our deadline, let's set 2 weeks. Let's have a manager's briefing on it, or run it through P&L where we can ask questions. But if we're going to go for approval of this resolution tonight, that's not something I'm in a position to support right now.
Mayor Wagner, is it possible that we could get members of the branch to weigh in on their preference on how we proceed tonight?
I'll acknowledge, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bernita Sims, and I'm a resident of the city of High Point. And I want to speak to where we are right now. When we left this meeting in September, it was with the understanding that there was some concern and confusion around the resolution as it was presented to this council that night. I think one of the things, Mayor Wagner, that you pointedly had some concerns about was the makeup of the commission, what that would look like, and what the expectations of that would be. So the charge was given for us to go back. You asked the city manager to form a working group to go back in, look at the resolution. Let's, dig off into it, make sure that there was an understanding about what that commission would look like, what the work of that commission would be if it were formed, and then how we would proceed forward. So as we met as that working group, those were the auspices we were working under. So we believed at that point that we were meeting with city staff, we were meeting with 2 members of the city council, we were meeting with 4 members of the NAACP, and we're going to dig off into that document and come back with a resolution that would be acceptable to this group. So at that point, legal worked with this. We worked with city staff, who was responsible for convening and making sure that we all understood the language that was in there, and that pretty much we stuck with the spirit of the document as we presented it, which is exactly what happened. And so when we start talking about what would be the responsibility of the city to this, it's only to do what it said it would do, which was, once you understood the makeup of the commission, which were the two, I guess, elements in this resolution that were unspoken at the time it was presented, that we would not be sitting here talking about somebody having to review it and make sure it was whatever you thought you understood, because you've had this resolution since September. The only new items added, other than the language changes that your legal department reviewed and said, we need to change these because they're things that the city cannot do. Are there things that the city, in its position as the city, is something you cannot do. So when you talk about international law, your legal department looked at that, and they didn't have an issue with it. And I understand you're an attorney, and I understand that when you look at this, you're looking at it with that eye. But what I would ask this council to do is do what you said you were going to do, which is to adopt this document once it came back to you. And so at this point, we're sitting here and we're talking about the fact that, oh, I don't know if we can commit the city. I get it. But the city commits every day to things that we don't get to weigh in on. As citizens in this community, you don't ask us. You make a decision and you move on. So what I would ask, and if we can't get this done, then that taste that it leaves in the mouths of our citizens is worse than if you did nothing at all. So what I would look at it and say, Councilman Hudson was aware, as well as Councilman Holmes, and the two other individuals that are employees of your city, as well as the city manager. I can't imagine at this point in time what would be in that document that scares you so much that you can't adopt it today, that it cannot be adopted for us to move forward with the establishment of that commission. And let's chop it up. Let's talk about it. Let's see what it is we need to do in High Point to create an equitable community for everybody. So I agree with Councilman Jefferson. There is nothing in this that you should be afraid of. And I think that it would speak volumes for this community to say, hey, look, we don't mind having conversations. And it doesn't hold you, commit you to anything other than to create a commission for the research and the discussion of how we might look at what has happened in the city of High Point and lift all of our citizens up, plain and simple. Thank you.
If I could also address the international law item. As Bernita Sims just commented, we did our best to maintain the spirit of the original resolution that came to us. In doing so, I made clear through John and his office to the working group that some of the things, the resolution that came to you guys stated as facts, could not be adopted by this council, because when you adopt something as fact, it is based on something that's been investigated by your staff, et cetera, and brought back to you. And that would not have been the case with what was stated as fact in the resolution that came to you originally. So those things, those items, remained in what you have, but there is a phrase at the beginning that says that these are facts that they brought as stated by them. It does not say that they are facts as adopted by this council. So I just offer that for explanation, but again, even as I say it and start explaining this to you, I mean, we could go through the whole thing.
Madam Attorney, a question for you. If I, as individual council members, voted, yes on something, does that mean that I'm agreeing with every single statement of fact because there's historical dates and all kinds of stuff, every little thing in there,
And
I haven't had a chance to review.
And clearly, I could not sit before you and say, you need to accept this as fact, because I was not able to go out and research, et cetera, right? So it's worded such that these were statements that were brought to you and presented. And I don't have it right in front of me, but I remember putting something in there that said basically that you are acknowledging that they appeared before you, that they brought a resolution, that that resolution contained X, Y, Z. And then we take off from there and go into the actual formal process and setting up of the committees, that the standing committee that does the appointment of the commission, and then the commission.
Well, just out of respect, I do a lot of business deals out there, and I've never lost respect for somebody saying, hey, let me run this by my attorney, let me run this by my partner, whatever. My constituents of Ward 5, it's comforting. Bernita said that Councilman Hudson's had a chance to read this, but my constituents didn't vote for Councilman Hudson. I owe them a period of due diligence, and I plan on, and have planned on meeting with you about this, because, as I stated earlier, I wasn't planning to do anything other than to accept this. I'll be in your office tomorrow or Wednesday if I can. I just want to make sure I'm clear about what I am, and I don't think it's, I think there's a common respect that we all have for each other, and we don't try to force anything down each other. All I'm saying is, I would like to go for what I sat down to do tonight, which was to acknowledge this. Out of respect, give us other council members that want a chance to get some questions answered about it. I'm okay with voting on this. I think this committee's going to be formed one way or the other. I really do. But there's a whole lot of information in there. There could be 2 + 2 = 5 in there, and I could have missed it, and I'm agreeing to it. I mean, I think we shouldn't change the intent of what the agenda said and say, we sat down to vote on accepting something, let's change that on the other members of council. It's just a mutual ask of respect to give us a chance to see what we're agreeing to and come back in 2 weeks and we'll vote on it.
Mayor Wagner, I got another thought. That's that curiosity of mine. So, we typically rely on partnerships with the community, and we ask them to continue to believe in our processes. We ask them to continue to participate. And we ask them to trust that this city, in which they are loyal taxpayers, residents, and constituents of, that this city will collaborate in a spirit of unity and a spirit of trying to just progress. And I often think it very noble and very bold of residents when they take it upon themselves to take those strides and go through the process and be belabored for months upon months upon months, because they understand the due diligence, thoroughness, and bureaucracy with which government has to move. And I have an appreciation for that. And, I get this thought that there are folks who have invested so much time, and, they were under the understanding that an action would be taken for this to go ahead and get started. They were under that understanding. And it's not lost on me that there were several members of council on this dais this evening that when we saw the words acknowledgement of receipt or saw this agenda item, and when Chairman Hudson sort of explained what we were doing, we were kind of thrown off because we were like, wait, we're voting to discuss and consider? Wait, what's going on? I think if we were kind of confused, I have to be a little transparent to say I would not be surprised if the public, when they saw that, had no idea that ultimately what was happening was we were just voting to consider something. I didn't know that. And to the points of not reviewing what's in the agenda and not reviewing all the attachments, I respect that. We have a duty to review everything that's in the agenda and the attachments. That is our duty. Whether it says acknowledgement or if it says whatever else, we have that duty. Because I would hope you wouldn't acknowledge receipt without reviewing it either. I think it is incumbent upon us that when folks make good on their partnership and collaboration with the city, that we really just do the right thing in this case and say, hey, we're not committing to any recommendations. It's not some legal problem that we're stepping into. I appreciate that word keeps getting used, but our legal folks here have already told us we're solid, so we don't actually have to say that part anymore. I think really where we're at is, are we willing to form a commission under the same tenets of every other commission that we ever formed? It's essentially under that. And we've trusted our staff, our manager, the departments over it, our legal team, and multiple members of council. We've trusted them to do that. That's what we asked them to do. And really, I'm at the point now, I'm making a motion to suspend the rules so we can bring this to council to be voted on for acceptance and approval.
If there is a motion that's been made to suspend the rules to bring this item before council for approval, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay.
I will say that if we vote on this right now, we're going to get a split vote. That is not what I want. I want a unanimous vote for this. And if you give us 2 weeks, I think you'll get a unanimous vote. I don't think any of us are opposed to this.
Right.
I mean, you know, that's just the simple truth. I don't want this to be a split vote tomorrow in the newspaper. I want it to be a unanimous vote, and I think it will be.
Well, I have a question. I'm not exactly sure who's responsible for agendas and stuff, but my understanding is that when something goes to committee, they research it, then they discuss it, and then they recommend either approval or not. And we never had the opportunity to get the recommendation out of our committee. I mean, because the finance committee meetings are always right before. We've got a P&L committee in 2 days.
Yep.
So, I mean, do you think, I don't know how quickly you could change an agenda, because there is a process. And, you know, I've been in situations a lot that I'm not doing the right process, and I get kind of, you know, called down and like, so, I mean, I don't know if that's the answer. Let's do the process properly, because we all got a little bit confused, or move on tonight. I don't know which way.
We did the process.
Mayor Pro Tem, I was about to say, I appreciate that. August 3rd, 2021, we went through that process, and our committee, P&L, voted unanimously to support this.
Yeah. And I've hoped for unanimous
we did that.
votes a lot, and I have been disappointed. So sometimes you just have to be disappointed.
Well, the committee
motion
doesn't
is
work.
to whether to suspend the rules. We're not actually discussing approval or disapproval. It's really just this is an agenda motion. So, all those in favor of, let's do a show of hands, please. All those in favor of suspending the rules to consider the approval of the resolution, please raise your right hand. Okay. All those opposed? Okay, that motion passes, so by a 5-4 vote. So we have 2 items on the agenda. We have one item to acknowledge receipt, and the other item to consider the approval of the resolution. And Chairman Hudson, it's still your floor.
Chairman Hudson, before you go, if I may, could I say a word? Because I think it needs to be known for this crowd and for the record, because I know where that salvo was aimed. It has been mentioned that it's the responsibility of an elected council to read their attachments. It was also mentioned that earlier someone had trouble with their password. That somebody was me. And due to some extraordinary circumstances and my family health situation, I didn't open my agenda until this morning. And when I opened it this morning, in the midst of trying to deal with that and some fires at work and that kind of thing, I had trouble with my password. It required some IT help to get done, so I did not get a chance to read that. So just for your clarification, that was me, and I did not get a chance to review this. So that's that.
If I may, and I'll try to be brief with this. I lean to the point that we do have commissions created. We do lean on our colleagues, we lean on staff, we lean on the information that's given to us to help us to make in addition to the information given to us in our agenda, to make an informed decision on issues. I have read this, and I get the heartburn on some of the items, that was maybe mentioned by the mayor. But with me, when it comes to things like this, as the work was done by staff, by members. The other key piece is there are safeguards in here when it comes to what we do next. If those weren't in place, at least in my mind, if they weren't in place, I would, say, let's do that. But the idea of those safeguards in place, the work that was put in before, and once again, I lean to something my colleague said before, this is the formation of the commission. The safeguards are also in the formation of the commission because 2 of the members of it are members of the council. can appreciate that too. So that's the reason why I'm in support for that. If it was, like I said, if those items weren't in place, I would have the same heartburn. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve 2022-47.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve item 2022-47. Is there any discussion?
Just for clarification, for anyone listening, that motion is for 2022-47, the resolution. One High Point Commission City Council is requested to acknowledge the receipt of the One High Point Commission resolution for consideration.
That's correct.
Or adopt the resolution.
It's,
No.
this is the acknowledged receipt, and then we'll adopt it.
Okay.
All right, any further discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve this resolution and adopt it in its current form.
Okay, there's a motion for approval of the resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second.
Did you let me make a
Any
substitute
discussion?
motion?
No?
Make a substitute motion that we table this until our next city council meeting.
Okay, there's a substitute motion to table this to the next city council meeting. Is there a second? Okay, hearing none, substitute motion fails for lack of a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Well, as I said, I would like this to be a unanimous vote, and out of respect for Councilmember Moore and Councilmember Jones, I will not be voting to accept this simply out of respect, and which makes this a split vote, and that's not what I want.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
I do have to say that I appreciate the discourse that as peers and colleagues on this dais that we often take, and I know we often do our best to lean in with our very best in terms of serving our constituents and representing well. And Councilman Moore, certainly appreciate your comments and can attest, I walked in as IT was getting you help, so I certainly appreciate and understand where you're coming from. And Councilman Hudson, I appreciate all of your leadership and really helping this get to where it is, and the rousing story that was shared the last time when we considered this, and we almost voted it through that night as well. So I certainly get all that, but look forward to us approving this tonight.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll do this again by show of hands. All those in favor of approval of the One High Point resolution, please signify by raising your right hand. Okay, all those opposed? Okay, the vote is 5-4, so the resolution is adopted. All right, next on the agenda is the community development.